All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Accuracy in America. I'm Don Irvine, your host, joined by my co-host, Brian McNichol.
Hello, deplorables, dregs, despicables, chomps, Neanderthals, and those dog-faced pony soldiers.
That's right. All right. Weather report. Looks like spring we finally kind of got hit a cycle here. Is this
So
good
very
golf
nice.
weather for you?
Yep, good golf weather. I was working yesterday. I've been working a lot of hours, and
Yeah.
the kids are like, "You're not golfing?" I'm like, "No." So I had a little break last week, and I was out there in the miserable rainy days. And now that it's good, it's like, I can't go. So
Yeah. I mean,
watching it out the window.
I even cut my grass the other day, and I'm like, because I was looking at the weather, and I'm like, it might rain a little bit in the morning, and I don't want to get to that. So, I squeezed it in there. But yeah, yard work's a pain. I hate yard work. I hate this. I hate manual labor, but it's cheaper than paying someone else to do it right now, and I'm still healthy.
Hey, I'll tell you what, that's one of those things. When I moved to where I live now, that was one of our things. It's like, I'm coaching basketball. I'm gone on the weekends. I really don't have time, and don't, I don't like it anymore. And so one of my things was someplace with no yard work, and that's what we got.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
All right, news. Just want to touch on this for a little bit. This news that broke yesterday with this Brooklyn subway shooting and everything like this. I mean, I guess the person of interest is now a suspect. It's kind of bizarre to me in a lot of ways. I mean, a guy gets on this train and he starts shooting and he injures 10 people, and there's another 24 or so maybe that are injured, and he had smoke grenades, and what the heck is going on up there?
So he was ready for this moment. Long, if it's the guy they think it is, right? Long history of screeds of hateful stuff putting on the internet of who all should be killed, and who hates white people, wants to kill white people, and all that. And it's real easy to let you go down that road with this story. But what strikes me is, like, how does this guy get like that? And he's not the only one. There are a lot of people like that, and they're lashing out in various ways. And thankfully, not all of them are shooting up subway cars. But it has to do with loneliness. It has to do with, this is a guy, there's no one in his life, right? And, these people get atomized, and they get where there's no one telling them, that's too much hate. There's no moderating force in their life. It's like, even like all your kids are gone, right? But like if you get too angry and, hateful about something, your wife is there, right? And she's like, settle down, dude, right? I mean, it happens to all of us from time to time, right? And so you have those moderating forces. You have people, you're bouncing your ideas off of people, and the ones that are unduly negative, you're getting that signal, right? Okay, all right, you're right. That's too negative. It's not really that bad. It's not all white people are screwing me over, right? It's, the guy that I worked for who cheated me, he's bad, but it's not all of them, right? So if you can just get it down to where it's, you're dispersing, and you're not allowing that focus on frustration and hate to just grow unbounded, and not any feedback against it. And, he's not the only one. And you look at the history of the people who do stuff like this, and that's a real prevalent thing. And it is getting a lot worse. We don't, like, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm sitting on the porch, and I'm in a Twitter conversation with a Twitter friend, someone I don't even know where they live, whether it's a boy or a girl, right? It's just someone I'm talking to, and that I talk to frequently. So I'm like, okay, I want to keep up with the conversation because, I want to, this is someone that I always talk to, and my kids are trying to tell me something. I'm like, hold on a minute. I am talking to a stranger whom I don't know where they are or who they are, or, but we kind of seem to agree on a few things, right? And we have fun talking. So you hold on, right? And then I'm like, okay, wait a minute. That's a lot more important than this, So hit my tweet and, did what I was, talk to my kids. But, there's the people who don't have that, right? That never happens. There's never that person who says, get out of that tunnel and look around.
Yeah, and we've seen several instances over the years of workplace violence, people coming back that are angry at former employees, their bosses, things like that have done things. I mean, the pandemic, with the isolation, all the lockdowns that we had, I think it really kind of sped up a lot of things for a lot of people. There were people who were, if you're enforced, really, you can't go anywhere. I mean, and you don't have, and you're single. I mean, you have no family or anybody else to bounce things off of, as you were saying. I mean, this kind of, you can spiral into things.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of those people, I mean, this guy probably has a history of this, right? I mean, you're referring to, but there are people who have had, no history that has spiraled, right? And
Right.
it is that loneliness, that is no one to talk to, and things like that, and you can't. There are not enough mental health counselors and crisis kind of people around to be able to handle the influx of all of this to really satisfy this. So it definitely is a real problem, and we see this. I mean, the kids. I mean, the kids were affected too. The kids that couldn't go to school had to do virtual school. That created another sense of loneliness. They weren't part of a group anymore. Lots of things that have happened here in the last couple of years that have probably accelerated a lot of things that are going on in this country.
Right, and the pandemic encouraged you to do that. I told my kids, I'm like, imagine if this happened 10 years from now. Y'all are gone, but you might not be yet married and settled down, right? You might, they're 15 and 17, so 25 and 27. You might be married, but you might not be. And you might be living all alone. You might be going through all this all by yourself, right? And you're not even allowed to come over or whatever. And, we wouldn't have you here. Like, what is, one of the good things about it was it did happen at a time when we all had each other, right? But that wasn't true of everybody. A lot of people, they were all alone. They faced this all alone. And that had to be a very different experience. You look like what's going on in Shanghai. I mean, that's just heartbreaking to see these people. It's like 30 or 40 million people are ordered they can't leave their house, right? They cannot go out the door of their house. And they're going nuts. I mean, I'd go nuts too.
Yeah, I mean, since you brought that up, we'll talk about that next then. I mean, this whole thing, it's, I get, call me a skeptic or whatever, but this lockdown is so severe that I can't believe that it's completely all about COVID, or something. Right.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, yeah, and you're saying, right. I mean, the people can't go out. I mean, they can't get food, they can't get medicine. I mean, it was kind of an amusing story, but it just shows you how nutty things are. People who had pets, people who had dogs, they couldn't take their dogs out, their pets out for a walk, which they need to have. So they actually had, before the lockdowns got into full force, they were cutting up patches of ground and taking it back to their apartments, putting it on their balconies so the dogs could have some stretch of grass to do their business and stuff like that. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, it's like, what you've got, I don't know. I mean, it's really insane. And it has a reverberating effect in terms of the world. We are a global economic, system now. Everything's so intertwined. So factories get shut down. There are things that we still get from there. People can't go to work really. There are factories that, because of that, there's all kinds of repercussions. I mean, there's maybe a little bit of softening of some, oil demand there, which is kind of interesting because since China had agreed to take on some Russian oil, if they lock down all these people and they're not driving, then they don't need this oil, right?
Well, I mean, China's, they got some bigger problems, but
I mean, just
right. Definitely their demand's going to slow in the places where they're doing this. The other things to think about this, a couple of things to think about. One is, this doesn't work, right? This lockdowns do not stop COVID. Two, 99.99% of people survive it. If you catch it, you're probably going to make it, right? Three, the Democrats, if they had not been checked, right, if they had been in charge, especially at the start of the pandemic, they would have tried to do the same thing, right? This was their idea for how to fix COVID, was to make us all stay in our house and patrol outside, push us back in the door if we came back. They talked approvingly of what went on in Australia, Austria, other places where people were persecuted for daring to try to get some food to eat and so forth, right? They wanted this. The Democrats would have been just fine with what's going on in Shanghai right now.
Yeah, and it's just another thing. I mean, we've see, where in Hong Kong, Carrie Lam is not going to run for another term to
Yeah,
oversee Hong Kong. But the person who probably likely will succeed her, is also as a hard liner as well. I mean, there's not the all the lack of freedom, all the suppression that they put in there. It's not going to get any better for citizens of Hong Kong. You know,
no.
this this China, Hong Kong, it's from a human rights scale, it's going to get worse. It's unfortunate, but it's going to get worse. And I think American businesses have to really rethink their long-term strategy about exactly what they're going to do in China, because this is, we're taking several steps back now in terms of what's going on in China. Not that they were ever great, but at least when we had some business in there, and they were looking like they were trying to be a little more capitalistic. At least Hong Kong for a long time. I mean, after they took it over, they had agreed, they were going by the agreement to kind of let Hong Kong operate, and it was a really good example of how capitalism can succeed and how things can be free. But the Chinese have decided, they're taking a different tack with that, and it's just really bad news, and it's very sad for Hong Kong.
Yeah, they lost control because a lot of Chinese capital gravitated there, right? It was
Yeah.
a free market bridge to the rest of the world that like internal China didn't necessarily have. So they had to rein it in because that's the way
You
they think.
know, and I came that close to buying a few shares of Alibaba, the American depository receipts. I think, I mean, the company was doing well, and I'm glad I just held back on that, because China cracked down on all those companies,
Yeah.
and the values plunged by like more than half. And I think we're on the verge of delisting a lot of those Chinese companies here in America. And that was a source of capital for them there too. So I mean, they're getting battered, for doing business. China is just, they've just taken a different look at this, and they're really going to hurt their people in the long run on this. It's once again, it's very unfortunate.
Right. And so it's one of the things we talk about is, United States is run by lawyers, and that has its own set of problems, right? But China is run by engineers. So they say, okay, we're going to try to get to zero COVID, right? We don't like COVID, we're going to have none, right? You don't want to have some if you don't like it, right? So, if you, they don't care. They shut everybody down. We're having zero COVID. We're going to make this happen. You don't think we can make this happen? Watch us try. Right. And there's no constraints on them, constitutional constraints and stuff like governments would have here. So, you don't know. You're just on the rack for it. You got
Well,
to take it.
I haven't looked too deeply at this at all, but I'm just now, you make me think here about, kind of also the long-term effect of what's going on here in terms, we have been, we've had lots of students come here to study from China. Will we ever see those levels again?
Yeah, that's right. And those Confucius Institute programs are going away. There's a lot of retrenchment from the Nixonian idea that we can, capitalism them into respecting human rights. Kind of didn't work. So
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. All right, we'll switch gears and go to Ukraine, because we're now at, what is it, day 49? It's
yeah.
just unbelievable. I mean, every week I'll say this,
46 more than homie
yeah,
thought it
I
was
mean,
going to take.
yeah, I mean, this is basically what we point out every week. It's basically, since Putin was probably expecting to do this in about 3 days, we're adding another 7 days every time we get together here, about how much longer this has been. This is getting to be a slog. This is definitely a quagmire. Putin has said, well, the peace talks, are dead, ended, and there's no hope there. I I just don't have. I never had any confidence that he was really serious about peace talks to begin with.
Well, I mean, if he would have been given the East, maybe
Yeah,
he could say, I got a third of the country and I don't really care about the rest. And could get to this Mariupol, the city that's in the south. So that gives you a land bridge to Crimea, which gives you a deep water port, which has long been an objective of, Russia meddling all around the world, right? As it doesn't have a deep water, warm water port, right? Its ports all freeze up. It's a big problem for Russia. So it's a very traditional thing, and the Russians are doing what they do. Their army is always been known for atrocity, right? Wherever it goes, and that's what they're doing now. They try to wreck the will of citizenry to fight, because it doesn't appear that unless they're going to try to nuke it, which makes it off limits to them for a good period of time too. They don't really conventionally seem to be able to subdue the country, and there's enough aid flowing in. The longer this goes on, the more daring the West gets about supporting them. The aid's flowing into Ukraine now. They're getting weapons from us and others, right? And Europe,
right.
People in Europe who never step up for these things are stepping up for this. So, the longer it goes on, the worse it gets for the Russians. So they're approaching the point where they got to think about, we make a strike or we get out. We come up with some face-saving measure and leave.
Yeah, when you see innocent women and children being slaughtered like this, and Putin keeps trying to throw up like the train station. Well, there was some military equipment or whatever. There's sort of, but they none of this stuff really holds water. And that when they pulled back, we saw the atrocities. Just the devastation that was left behind there. That I think does galvanize the West. All those countries that have generally stayed away and been very neutral and pacifist in a lot of ways are saying, this changes the whole equation. I mean, we cannot stand by and watch this because we feel a threat.
Like the Maryland lottery used to say, it could be you.
Yeah.
I mean, it really could be. It could be, all these people standing there, they're not on the sideline. Poland's not on the sideline. Poland's right there in it. They don't have any choice.
It is gratifying to see people step up with aid, and it's really great to see people stepping up to provide the humanitarian aid. We talked a little bit about this last week, but it continues to pour in, and refugee efforts continue to happen. We're willing to take some people in here in the United States, and
and the Russians continue to try to sabotage it every way they can, which ensures the world opinion is not going to come their way, right? I mean, Tucker Carlson will be on the last train out of town on this, right? Because no one's coming around to the Russian point of view the way the Russians are conducting this war.
Yeah, I mean, does Putin care about public opinion?
Well, only to the extent it's a threat to it. And so, if he has right now he has the whole of the Western world aligned against him. And, that's terrible for their economy. It's terrible for their rich people. Their rich people now have to get detached from Russia and out of Russia, and their activities, their financial activities are severely limited by this going on. So it's not, does he care about the PR of each individual move? No, he doesn't. But he's not free of considerations of this.
Yeah, I mean, and he has snuffed out dissent. They have, they've used a lot of threat. They've, anybody where we saw in the beginning, Russians were taking to the streets and they were demonstrating against that. They've snuffed that out. It's a lot like, they've just cracked down like Hong Kong cracked down and things like that. There's just, we're not going to let the world see the fact that our decisions are not popular and we're actually suppressing human rights and doing the other thing. We're just gonna make sure it's like, you do this, we're either going to kill you or we're going to throw you in jail and you'll never be heard from again. Kind of a thing like that, right? Just so they seem to effectively have done that, but it's hard in the court of public opinion. Now, I mean, I think that's Putin has lost this battle, and they're struggling on the battlefield itself. He's planning another big offensive, I guess, but maybe the best case he can hope for is that he gets full control and of the eastern region of that, and then that's about all he'll be able to get. I don't know that he can get Mariupol.
So he like a week into the war, they were saying he'd pushed in 90% of what he had. So he's got to be over 100% now, which in other words, he's bringing stuff into Ukraine that wasn't there at the start of the war, that he didn't think that they would be needed for the war. So now, I mean, the expense of this, like we have kind of unlimited, the Democrats are sort of right. Like money is not really an object for us in fighting these wars. It is, in the extreme it is, right? but to a large extent, we can do fully what we have to do without worrying about money. But that's not necessarily true of the Russians, right? They're what is it? Texas has a bigger economy than Russia, right? So, there's a limit to what they can do. There's a limit to the amount of failure they can absorb. And as for the PR, the Chinese apparently are affected by it, right? That, when all this started, the Chinese were going to rush in and they were going to buy all that oil, and, they're going to pay them in rubles and all this kind of stuff. And it's like now, they're sort of handoffs in there. Maybe we should do this in yuan, right? Now, one of the things that we can finance all this debt that we have and afford it because we are the international currency, right? Everything's marked to the dollar. That's under more threat now than it has been at any time in your or my lifetime. And if that goes away, you don't really know all that will happen, but you have to assume a lot of it will not be good.
Yeah, and they're trying to continue to put economic squeeze on Russia, and I mean it definitely has some effect. I mean, you mentioned the rich and things like this. I mean, people start getting squeezed, it's going to get harder. I mean, exactly where does Russia turn? If China really can't do what they had promised to do, and they're not going to pay them in rubles after all, and there's a lot of things going on here. How long can Putin afford to go on with this? We do have, in that extreme sense, we do have unlimited resources. I mean, we are, there's no, we're not having a budget battle right now on sending aid to Ukraine. We're doing this. We just, Congress gets in there and say, we're going to send $700 million or whatever in aid. We're going to do this. We're going to do that, whatever. Nobody's batting an eyelash at this point in time and what that will be. We're doing what we need to do. But we have the wherewithal to be able to do that, and that does not happen everywhere in the world.
Right.
By any stretch of imagination.
Yeah.
No. Right. So what about Biden now? I mean, he his talk about now genocide. I mean, he's been trying to ratchet these things up. Is it too little, too late? Is this just politicking? Is he just trying to look good? What's in there? What's in Joe's head?
Well, I mean, he is trying, like we were talking about, like, world opinion is important in this, right? You don't want, if our block starts to fold, which you have until basically next winter, right? It starts to get cold in Europe again, and they don't have the energy to do anything about it. Then what happens? Are there compromises made? Do we say, okay, Russia, we kind of hear you now? We start trying to work something out, right, with someone else's sovereignty and freedom and whatnot. That could happen. So, he is trying to keep that coalition lined up and hardcore against it and expose the worst about them. And yeah, it's information warfare, but it's not inappropriate under these circumstances. Yeah.
So I mean, I guess he's trying, right? I mean,
he's trying, and it sounds like, the guy in the back of the room, man, if I could only get to you, I'd take you out, and it's like, yeah, right, buddy. You could only get to him, then it'd be time for you to run, so he has a problem. He tries to talk tough, and he is resolutely not tough, and everyone knows he's not tough. So you lose some credibility, when he goes too far on these things. But, they should be trying to keep the pressure on Putin every way they can.
So I'm going to switch over to France because there'll be an election coming up within a couple of weeks. This is going to be interesting. I mean, it's a rematch between Macron and Le Pen. But after round one, it was a lot closer. I mean, Macron early on had been way far ahead of Le Pen. I mean, in the third, the real socialist candidate and everything like that, and the lefty. Now it's down to between the two of them. Now, when they faced off, was it 5 years ago? I guess it was. I mean, Macron, he won pretty handily, but he's not quite as popular as he was then. I mean, he was a new guy in a sense, and he is trying to increase the retirement age from 62 to 65. Well, wars that you have to work a little bit more.
Well, I mean, the thing on politics on that is, what should it be? What it is, right? Whatever it is, that's what the proper age is. You try to go up or down, you got a big problem. Who knows? Why did why did the heavens anoint us with 65 and France was 62 and other people with 59? I don't know, but they did, and trying to change them is a heavy lift.
Yeah, look, I have this thing about Europe though, okay, and their work, and everything. This is that
Like
it's like you want to talk about the
vacation.
softest workers in the world? They're coming out of Europe, okay?
Yeah, that's
I mean,
right.
I mean, how many times? I mean, back in the day, the AIM used to get, we'd get some. I take some interns in from Germany and other places around the world, and after they went home, I mean, they would talk about, going on holiday. They're constantly going on holiday.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're like, oh, we got the good life. Like, but you haven't moved the ball appreciably in hundreds of years since you started taking all the holidays.
Yeah.
Right. Europe used to be generating almost all the progress that was getting made in the world. Right. And now it's next to none.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the official figures are for worker productivity, but they have to be pretty abysmal.
Yeah, because they don't care. Right? They're like, oh, we all agree. Hey, we all agree. Okay, that's fine.
Right. I mean, look,
for mediocrity.
Right, and they think, to me, they think is okay. We get a job. The job is now our right. It's our birthright, and we have until we get to age 62 or whatever it is, and then we get a pension and we live the good life or whatever. So don't you dare even try to cut our pension or dare raise our retirement age,
Right.
So, but look what's happening. Look what happens in Asia. I mean, Japan kind of had that whole system of where people would work for a corporation for 30, 40 years and they'd get the pension and all of this stuff. But it did have an effect over time as the world moved on, of cutting down the productivity. They had a lot of other issues. Japan and Korea in particular, I mean, they work long hours, but also at the expense of their family. They have a population problem. Europe is facing that population issue too. They're throwing money at people. They're trying to get people in a lot of places in Europe to say, we will pay you to have a baby, and we'll pay you to do a lot of things because no one's having babies. We're going to be in a real bad situation here in 20 years if we don't do something. But this is all interconnected to me. All of these
It's
things.
also like the thing we're talking about right at the front was, the loneliness, right? You're conditioned now to not, I want to do what I want to do. I don't want to have to change somebody's diapers and all that. I mean, I can't go to the bars or wherever that night. I can't go fishing, right? I got to deal with this. Okay. It starts taking away your time, but I mean, as you know, it's hilarious and it's fun and it's rewarding and, but you don't, that's not what society tells you about parenting, right? Yeah. It tells you doesn't let you be you, right? You're out of being you.
Yeah, I couldn't remember the term I was thinking about Japan. So that was salary man.
Yeah, salary man. Yeah, word they took straight from us.
Yeah. That was the big thing. So yeah, it just, I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting because, now apparently because they're so close in the polls, and if the polls are accurate, I do not know, but they're both now trying to, wean the people on the left into their camps to win. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what that country will be like if Le Pen wins. Okay.
To me, I argue that it's worth a try. I don't think that they can do a whole lot worse than what they have. What's she going to do? Right. The institutions, like she'll be in the situation Trump was in. You can make some progress, but the whole of institutional France, every person who could remotely be described as a Mandarin of France, right, will stand against her, will obstruct her in every way. So you'll get some fresh thinking on it. I mean, to me, I don't see where it would hurt them a lot. You're now in a stagflation. Other people, the EU and others, control your fate on, military defense, foreign policy, energy policy, economic policy, right? You've ceded a lot of control to the EU, and you've gotten malaise. The standard of living in France is the same as the standard of living in Mississippi and West Virginia, right? I don't think, most of the other states do not aspire to be Mississippi or West Virginia. So no offense to those states. They're perfectly fine states, but, that's where we are. So, right. I don't know that they have a heck of a lot to lose.
Yeah, I will say one thing about Le Pen. I mean, is that nothing seems to bother. I mean, she has run and run and run, right? I mean, she doesn't care how many times she loses. She just keeps coming back. She doesn't
Yeah.
give up. So,
I mean,
maybe.
she's for a thing. I mean, I think that's, one thing about it is like, oh, she just wants power. I mean, I think she has ideals, and ideas and a way of running France, in her mind, and she's ready to go. Right?
Yeah.
Will it work? I don't know, but
Yeah.
what they're doing now is not really working.
She reminds me of other people. I mean, I don't necessarily totally agree with her and things like this, but I do admire her passion.
Yeah.
I think she is very passionate and very committed to the things that she believes in. This is not I'm doing this because I do want the power. Maybe that is probably a part of the whole thing that I want to, this would be the pinnacle of my life, my career to do this. But the fact that she has continued to run and do this and been there in the stead, she and her dad, I guess it was. I mean, they're a movement. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no doubt about it. So they're very passionate, and there are a lot of people around, a lot of people who are in politics around the world who don't have anywhere close to the passion that Marine Le Pen has. So we will see what happens here as they kind of jockey for this whole thing. But yeah, I don't think Macron expected it. But part of that was that, and they have, like you mentioned, the inflation issue is a problem for them, and whoever's in office. I mean, this is the same thing that Joe Biden is facing, right? You're in office, you've got high inflation, you've seen people's standard of living being eroded. It's your job to find a way to fix it. Don't blame others and point out the fingers. You've got to fix this. Otherwise, you probably will be voted out of office. And I think this is going to be a problem for Macron, is how is he going to convince voters that, in another 5-year term, he's going to be able to figure this out. Right. Joe Biden's already having that problem. I mean, he's back. Once again, it's Putin.
Right. It's always Putin or Trump.
Yeah, it's not me. It's Putin. It's somebody else. I had nothing to do with this.
Here's one along those lines to think about. How did the Democrats get unstuck from Biden? Right. If he wants to run, do they clear the field for him? Does someone dare? Is there a Ted Kennedy out there who will dare to run against him? And what happens if they do? They got a big problem here. You got a guy he's pulling right at 40%, right? And has been in the dumps for a long time. You have to start to think, Trump got out. Trump went through a deep ravine like this, and then he got out of it. And he never got too awfully popular, but he got pretty close to even, right? He got in the high 40s most of the last 2 years of his term. This guy has been stuck since Afghanistan last August. He hasn't been above 43% a single day.
Yeah, see, and I don't know. I mean, with Trump, with all the ups and downs and pros and cons of Trump, he has a very rabid base. There are people who, I mean, here it is. I mean, here we are in 2022, and he's still got his loyalists are his loyalists. And I just don't know that Joe Biden, who managed to win this election to become president, has that kind of a base. They came together and they got the vote out. A lot of it was obviously anti-Trump, type of thing like this. Without Trump in the race, if Trump is not in the race, what happens to Biden? I mean, they've got just a slew of negative things that have been happening. It's hard to imagine, between now and November for the midterms, that inflation will moderate enough that people, will say, oh yeah, I'll still vote for the Democrats. I was reading an interesting article in the Wall Street Journal about New Jersey. They've interviewed some families, some people who were Democrats. I mean, they'd been lifelong Democrats. A lot of them were younger people, in terms of, in their 40s, 30s and 40s, but they'd always voted Democrat. But between the mask mandates, the shutdowns of the schools and things like this, these people who are parents, they voted against Phil Murphy. One of these women, I mean, she's like, what is she, a skateboard instructor? I think it was he interviewed. She's got a couple of kids, and she, she had a real problem with the schools and the mask and the remote learning. She just couldn't take it anymore. She actually, I think, ran for school board kind of like as a Republican or at least, somewhere along that line. And she won. She's now in office. But I mean, the more liberal leaning, Democrat leaning school board people a lot of them were thrown out this election cycle in New Jersey. Phil Murphy obviously got the scare of his life. He scraped
the
by.
Senate president lost to a guy that spent $148 on his campaign.
Yeah, I mean, it's just you just see things, and there's been redistricting there, and they interviewed several of these people are like, we're not sure who we're going to vote for in November, but Kane's son is running in a district that was where the incumbent went, I think, from like +10 to +3. So all of a sudden, it's a winnable race for the Republicans, and enough if that sentiment continues to carry over. From the whole thing that they just faced in the gubernatorial election, this guy who I can't remember the name of, I think starts with M. He could lose, his seat in Congress. So there is still all of these things going on, and it goes all the way up to the Democrats and the Biden administration. These policies, all these masking policies, these COVID policies, these school policies, everything like this. There are parents who have said enough is enough. I can't run my business. I can't educate. My kids are falling behind in school. They're suffering. We continue to talk about the emotional suffering, all of these things. All these things add up, and the parents are like, I can't do it anymore. I mean, I can't vote for those politicians who put those policies into place.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been telling people is like, the Democrats keep talking about, you got to explain to people why the economy is better than they think, right? There's 8% inflation, right? The highest inflation since 1981. But, you just don't realize we're adding jobs and this and that and the other. And it's like, if they only knew, if they would only listen to the whole story, right? And it's like the whole story is 8.5% inflation, So that's how we tell, right? And it's like, yeah, you're adding some jobs, but it's because things are reopening that you had kept closed for so long. So, you're taking credit for something you really didn't do. So, the thing that really hurts Democrats now is we gave all their policies a good, hard, solid college try, and they don't work, right? Higher taxes has not worked. Spending money like crazy has definitely not worked, right? COVID policy has not worked. Border policy has not worked. Foreign policy has been an unmitigated disaster, right? Economic policy, terrible, right? What are they doing good, right? They're messing up everything. So they're showing their cards. They're being for what they're being for. Joe Biden promised to eliminate petroleum, like exploring oil exploration in this country during his presidency, eliminate it. And he's on the way to doing so. And the implications of that are, startling. He better not succeed. He better not get that done.
Yeah, the Democrats. I mean, here we have Democrats. What have they been doing? They
bring the plane into the mountain. That's what they're doing. It's like the question is why? What do you think you're going to achieve with all this?
Well, and they're boogeymen on all of these things, particularly with inflation. It's like, okay, we're bringing in the poultry executives because it's collusion there. We're going to bring in the oil. We're talking about that excess profits tax type of thing again, and all these things. And yet, there was a time when they were, they're now railing against these oil execs, saying you're not doing enough. You need to provide. You need to drill more and provide more. Well, it wasn't that long ago. You told them, you're trying to eliminate fossil fuels, and you don't want them to do that. And your policies have said, right. We don't want this pipeline. We don't want leasing. We don't want to lease any more land.
Department of Interior to slow walk every application you have in front of you.
Right.
Right. So they did. They're guilty of sin of that.
Yeah, and all of this. So they're trying to play that greed factor. And I don't know. I don't think that plays with the American public. I don't think it resonates at all with them, because I think, just as you said, Biden gets up there. I mean, this is what just makes me crazy every time we get an unemployment report. He says, America's booming, jobs are great, they're blah blah blah, all this kind of stuff. But that's a small part of the story. What really affects people is this inflation figure. And we get various inflation figures there because there are different things that happen. We've got a producer price index, we've got the consumer price index, we've got food inflation going higher. I mean, we all see it. I mean, I mentioned last week, I mean, it's
by the way, producer price index even worse than consumer.
Right, it is right.
This is going to get worse.
Right. So that goes ahead. But I think, when you ask people, because as I said last week, I mean, my wife has gone around and shopped around, for rice, and, it's up, 30-40%, type of thing like that. That's a big staple of a lot of things that she cooks for not just ourselves, but for others and things like that. Those things up, oils, cooking oils and things like that to cook a lot of the food. That has
a long history of wars fought over cooking oil, by the way. They better figure that one out. That's a line in the sand for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, and if you're in, when you're in Central America, South America, rice, cooking oils, a lot of these basic things that they eat a lot of, when the price shoots up like this, you're now sending them into starvation territory. I mean, they can't afford to buy. If they can find it, they can't afford it.
That's right.
And so you're creating another whole crisis in and of itself. Biden is so disconnected from all of this. None of this makes, he doesn't see this.
Yeah,
I mean,
buy an electric car.
Right. Yeah.
I don't have one, but you'd like it. 55,000,
Right. Everybody can afford a 50,000 plus electric car. It's like, how are you making that happen exactly? It just, we already know that the most of the private charging, companies, that are out there, they're losing money. How long, how much money is the government going to subsidize? I mean, that's going to have to be part of the equation, I think, if he's going to do it, is that it's taxpayer money to subsidize the state charging stations, because there's just not going to be enough demand. You can't get demand up high enough, fast enough to make this work.
Right. Or people will be out doing it now. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, exactly. I mean, that's the kind of thing. So it's just, it's interesting to watch what is going on here. But it's hard. I mean, retirees, I mean, they talk about Social Security. I mean, they got a pretty big bump this year because of inflation, the figure at the point where they actually calculate what the increase will be, which is usually, I think, in the summer. They calculate it for the January checks. And they'll have another big one, but it's not enough to keep up with the cost of living. I mean, they're losing more ground now than they were when they were getting the smaller increases because inflation was low. The gap between
especially when the worst is yet to come, right? This will be a lot worse this time next year.
Yeah, I mean, they'll get a bump, but the chances are is that gap will be worse than it was this past year, and definitely worse than it was 2 years ago. So all the people who are complaining about the next to nothing increases in Social Security when inflation was running 2% or whatever, they're thinking, oh wow, I just got a $150 increase in my Social Security check. Oh, but I'm spending $200 more on food and rent and whatever it is. So
things I can't avoid, things I can't not buy.
Yeah, and stuff like that. And all it's just kind of interesting to see all this. But this is a big problem for the Democrats in terms of where do they go? Where
you got to say is like the important part is to make sure the voters understand this in November, and make sure. And I think blame accordingly.
Right, and I've always felt for years that that the pocketbook is what motivates a lot of voters in there. When inflation is benign, then you're just kind of like, are there jobs available and stuff like
this?
Then
you can worry about Trump's tweets.
Yeah, right. But with inflation this high and likely to stay at near 40-year highs or right at that level probably for the next several months, that is going to be a big factor, I think, in a lot of places where even the redistricting that the Democrats did to try to preserve themselves, they still may get overwhelmed here in November as a result of this. And the Democrats, I think, are they're worried, and rightfully so, because they don't have an answer to this. They can't bring Biden out on the trail for anything because the policies have been a complete mess.
Right, that's right. And you can't, ask Terry McAuliffe what happens if you get him to stop for you.
Right.
That was a long time ago. He was in better shape then than he is now.
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't put it down here, but I did mean to to do this, which was so Kentanji Brown Jackson has now been confirmed. She won't she won't get sworn in until Breyer retires, so that won't be until what, June or July,
Yeah.
when the term ends, and so then she'll be a part of the court, and then the court will begin its term in October as usual. I'm look, this once, elections have consequences, as you have rightfully said. We kind of knew this was happening. It was pretty much impossible to stop this from her being confirmed. But what just continues to drive me crazy is that, even after she's confirmed and everything like this, is still the liberals, the media, the other liberals that are out there saying, complaining about how, the Republicans, missed the chance. They weren't, they should have been voting for her, but they didn't. We only had the three. I think there was another story about, Tim Scott missed the chance to be a part of history.
Okay, so in the name of what, anti-racism or to further racial interests, he should vote for someone just because of their race. That's what they're saying, right?
Right.
Okay, that's you really quit considering race. Really stop making that a factor, right? Then we don't have to hate each other over it anymore, right? You could get all the hate out of the system if you just really and truly quit thinking about people in terms of their race, right? It's immutable. There's nothing anybody can do about what race they are. It guides a few things, whether you can catch certain diseases and whatnot. But, most people are people, and good people are good people, and bad people are bad people. It doesn't matter what color they are. So, what people don't understand about this, man, I was on a show last week, and the people were, the one guy's like, it's amazing how badly they treated her. And I'm like, what? Considering the last three justices and the circus of Clarence Thomas, and you're going to talk to me about that? I mean, the Republican questions have a right to be asked, right? It's 50 of the senators. Half the Senate is Republican. So half the country wants a certain set of questions asked of this nominee. And with her, it ended up being sentencing policy, which is not an uncommon theme of Supreme Court justices, especially Democrats. It's one thing Republicans have hit on consistently over the years. Oh, you're a light sentencer, right? You don't care about keeping the criminals locked up, right? It's a fairly common political attack, and they fight back, and sometimes the other side wins, right? Early in the Trump term, Trump signed a bill reducing a bunch of criminal penalties. Guys, it was mainly drug offenders, but he got a lot of people out of prison with what he did. So, there are arguments to be had about sentencing policy. Also, the overlaid with the child porn stuff. She seems to be, willing to consider other punishments for child porn people to sort of divide out the seriousness of it. If you're just looking, you're not as culpable as people who are producing it. I would say that is a slippery slope argument there, right? You're moving toward acceptance of something that we in the West do not now accept, and that's sex with kids, right? We say we keep your hands off the young people, right? When consenting adults do, they do, right? And that's not a problem. What's a problem is kids who don't know any better, you messing with them, okay? And the other side is trying to break down that wall. They're like, why is that illegal? Well, it's illegal, because it's not decent. It is fundamentally wrong. And we're going to keep fighting to point out that it's fundamentally wrong and to oppose anybody who pushes for it. And so they were not able to get it to the point where it was a referendum on child porn sentencing policy. But if they could have, then, you put a lot, then my question for those people is like, why did no Democrat have the courage to stand up and say, hey, look, the child porn people got to go to prison, right? I mean, they're like, oh, why don't Republicans, stand up and do this? Now, what about Democrats? How do you just let somebody who's soft on making excuses for child porn offenders on the court? How do you just reason that away?
Yeah. Well, I mean, and the thing is just that the way the Democrats play this is just, they want to inject the race card, into this whole process. And all this, and their memory in terms of, just like you mentioned, the previous Supreme Court justices that have been going up for confirmation, the treatment that the Democrats gave them, Oh, that doesn't matter. That's a completely different issue.
Yeah,
We can
they don't
do
even
that.
remember it. They don't
Yeah,
even remember it. It's like it
yeah.
didn't even happen.
Yeah, we can do that to the Republican nominees, but you cannot say anything remotely similar or to a Democrat nominee.
And then the guy comes back and he says, "Well, the process is broken." I'm like, "No, the process is fine, right? What happened in that process? We had hearings. They didn't go on unduly long. No one was beaten on the door of the court. There were no people accosting senators in the elevators and screaming at them and pulling these wild stories out of crazy women all over the country. It was hearings. Substantive policy related questions were asked, right? And then there was a vote, and the nominee got approved, right, with some Republican votes. Okay, we have moderates in our party, and we, unlike the Democrats, we don't kick them out. Every once in a while, we want to throttle them, but for the most part, I mean, we exist with our moderates, right? We exist with our Susan Collins, and we exist with our Mitt Romney. You can say what you want about Susan Collins, but tell me another Republican in Maine who could go win by 18 points, a statewide election, right? They don't exist. So, you kind of have to be understanding of as she manages her situation.
That's right. All right. The last word, 2 minutes, whatever.
Last word. Let's see. What do I want to say? Winning Palin is running for Congress.
Well, I mean, look, my thing, I put it on it because it's crazy. I mean, there are like 48 people I think have been certified to run. The top 4 will then they'll get re-ranked by ranked choice voting because they changed all the rules, and then the top 2, I guess, will face off against each other. I don't know. I'm very old school. I know things are, elections have been different. They, in Louisiana for like forever, but I preferred the way it was before. I'm very old school about Republican primary, Democrat primary. You face off and you do that because that's the way it's done in a large part of the country. But this thing, and by adding the ranked choice in there, I don't know who, what's going to go on there, and I don't think no one really is, is sure about how this is all going to work out. But it just invited everybody and their brother to jump in.
But so in Louisiana, when they did this, most of the moderately conservative people were Democrats. So you would have these elections where you would have Dave Treen and you would have 10 Democrats, right? So they all ran in a thing, and it was Dave Treen and one of the Democrats. And then you had Dave Treen against one of the Democrats for the general, right? And it went on like that for 3 or 4 cycles, right? And he won 2 terms and so forth, but it basically made it basically assured one of the finalists was going to be a Republican. Other stuff on here. So Musk is not going to get on the board of directors, because if you're on the board of directors, you can only own 14.9% of the stock. And he wants the freedom to buy controlling interest, or, that's the talk on the street. Who knows what he really wants, to, make it a free speech bastion. It's interesting, how bad for America the liberals suddenly think that would be, right? As long as free speech was, as long as Twitter was silencing conservatives, there's no need for oversight. They're a private company. They can do whatever they want. But now that it's us, we might need some government regulation here. So, we are what we are. Biden wants to have E15 gas all summer. Terrible for your car, terrible for the economy, terrible for the environment, but it might lower the price of gas for a penny or two. He is monstrously short-sighted, as are the folks in Philly and I guess a couple of colleges around here, Georgetown, somebody else, mask mandates.
Yeah, AU.
Yeah. They didn't work the first time, right? They didn't reduce any disease or spread or any of that stuff. So, I guess they got better masks or something, maybe. You can't take them seriously anymore. And I think, we're coming to the point, and I say that, and I'll say this and shut up, but here, Shanghai, all that stuff, you're getting to the point where people are not going to put up with this anymore. And then that's when things get interesting.
Yeah. All right. That's a good way to end the show. All right, everyone. Once again, thank you for joining us today. Please, as always, stay safe and healthy and well. Remember, we live in the greatest country in the world. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And God bless America. We will see you again next week.